Sharing that, I think for me, obviously, a whole lot of brokenness in my own story. I think everybody's got some degree of it, but mine began just anxiety in general. Really came about with leadership, like
Mm,
just really feeling like I'm in a fishbowl and I got to get it figured out. And
yeah.
even in a similar way, right now, there's three houses around me that attend Embrace. Like, and it's like
You
if
can't
I
freak out in the front yard.
you can't freak out. Yeah, if you're gonna freak out, go inside.
Yeah.
Like, and so you feel that same way in a lot of ways of just like that. And it just in my most successful seasons, I'm putting that in giant quotes. I've felt the most broken and anxious ever. Like,
Yeah.
and when everybody's kind of cheering you on and celebrating, it's like, well, I'm glad you're cheering because I feel like I'm drowning right now in a whole lot of different ways.
And I don't know if you have felt this, but for me, every time the church would grow, I wouldn't be excited. I would feel more pressure
Yeah.
because now that's more people I have to pretend to.
Yeah.
And that's more people that at some point are going to figure out that I'm not all that good and I'm not put together right. And I'll tell you, the one thing happened in church. This was right before my huge breakdown on the side of the road. It was the week before. It was all kind of compiling. This amazing couple came up to me after a church service, and they were just trying to be nice. And the husband had real bad cancer. Like he was very close to the end of his life, and young couple, super tragic situation. And the wife comes up to me, and we're talking, and we're doing our thing, and then she looks at me and she goes, "Man, your sermons are the only thing that is keeping us going." And she hits me on the shoulder, and she goes, "So no pressure, but it better be good again next week." And I went, and they walked off, and I'm like, she just described the semi truck that sits on my chest every single week before I preach. And I had gotten into such a rut of trying to perform as a pastor. I'm performing for Instagram. I'm performing for other pastors. I'm performing for church. It was killing me. And I didn't even realize it was all happening until I took a step back. And I left the church for 5 months and went through 7 weeks of inpatient anti-anxiety counseling. Like, I had to take a big step back to go, dang, look at how dysfunctional you've been approaching your job. And so that was definitely part of it. And the more the church grew, the more I felt it.
Yeah, and Sean and I are pastors, obviously, but I've heard physicians, I've heard business leaders, I've heard people in education world explain the exact same thing. It felt like the more, whether it's leadership or reports they have or whatever it is, that really translates. Sean, something I think it's almost doubly challenging, and that might not be true, to talk about anxiety as Christians.
Yeah.
Just the cliches. I don't know how many misconceptions you've heard. Sean, if you just had more faith,
Yes.
like then all of
Yeah.
it would disappear.
Yeah. Well, and that was the church I came from. If you didn't get a healing of some sort, it was because of sin or lack of faith. And I didn't necessarily believe that myself. It was just I'd only been a part of one church since I got saved, and that was really how they felt. And so here I am now, a senior pastor, trying to figure out God and life and me and church. And I felt like I can't tell anyone because I'm a pastor, because if I do, they won't probably want to follow me. But I couldn't reconcile in my mind, does that make me a hypocrite? Because I talk about a Jesus who gives peace and joy and freedom, but I don't have peace and joy and freedom. So maybe I shouldn't be a pastor. Maybe I'm just a hypocrite. Maybe I don't have enough faith. Like, it wasn't only like a crisis of inside my mind about me, but also a crisis inside my mind about, would my wife think the same of me if she knew how bad I was? Would I want to be a superhero to my three boys?
Yeah,
What are they going to think if they know? Like
yeah, yeah.
all these spider webs.
Oh yeah, that's good. So practically, how to fight back against anxiety? Like, what are some things that have been helpful specifically for yourself? Like, gosh, if you're in it right now, panic attacks or just some anxiety, here's 4 really practical things I'd encourage you to do.
Well, that's really that was what the whole book I wrote was
Yeah.
about. It was kind of like 4 or 5 things to do, 4 or 5 things not to do. Gosh, we could talk for hours, I think, about that. I think for me, the first thing I needed to do was stop hiding. I needed to stop hiding. How many times have we preached on getting in groups and bearing one another's burdens? Nobody was bearing my burden because nobody knew what it was. I was surrounded by men and women of God every single day I went to work who would have loved to battle with me. They just didn't know I was in a battle. And so I had to come to the place where I was willing to say, I have to share what's going on, and I'll just let the chips fall where they may, and I'll trust God with whether or not I should be a pastor anymore. But I can't keep holding it in. And I think Satan wants us to believe that we have to hold it in because he knows that we die in isolation. That verse, pity the one who falls and has no one to help him up. That was me. I was the guy who had no one to help him up. And I'm preaching weekly about make sure you got people in your life to help you up. And so the first thing I had to do was stop hiding. And I had to tell my wife, and I had to tell her the depths of it. I had to tell my boys all of it. And then I needed help. I needed to go get counsel, but I couldn't do any of that if I was going to keep it a secret.
That's good.
So I think that was the very first and biggest step was, man, stop hiding it. The lie I believed was my wife won't think the same of me. My boys won't think the same of me. And I'll never forget, I was in this counseling facility with my wife, and she looked at me one day. We were a few weeks in, and she goes, Shawn, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. I just know it. I know it. And I started crying. I said, what if I don't? That was the scariest question I think I've ever asked my wife. We'd been married 20 years at that point. I said, what if I don't? And then without hesitation, she looks at me and she goes, I'm not going anywhere. And I realized, I don't think I've ever felt this loved by my wife until this moment. Because for 20 years, my wife says, I love you. And in the back of my mind, I think, you love what you know about me. But if you knew the last little bit, if you knew the dark thoughts I have, I don't know that you really would. And after I finally said, here's everything I'm fighting with, and she said she loved me, I was like, this is the first time I think I've ever let her really know me.
Yeah.
And now I know that she really loves me. And so it was crazy.